This is Priyanka Rajneesh giving a first proposition speech on the motion. This House believes that an international system with two or more superpowers is better for developing countries than an international system with a single superpower. Judge, great powers rarely act out of charity. They pursue influence, markets, resources, and strategic advantage. In a unipolar world, there is only one power that matters. In a multipolar world, great powers must compete, and that competition gives developing countries something they very rarely get: choice. Because choice creates leverage and leverage creates development, we are so proud to propose. Before my two substantives, I want to make four framing observations key to your ballot. First, this debate is not about whether superpowers are benevolent. They are not. Every major power in this debate, whether it's China or the United States or others, acts primarily out of its own interest. The question is which international structure best incentivizes those powers to serve the interests of developing countries. Second, this debate should be judged on the everyday realities of development rather than exceptional moments of crisis. Opposition might point to proxy wars or geopolitical tensions. The more important question is what the average day looks like for a developing country. Who finances infrastructure, who buys its exports, who provides investment, and whether it possesses leverage in negotiations. Third, developing countries are not passive victims. Opposition might often characterize poorer states as pieces on a geopolitical chessboard. Countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Kenya, and India, however, routinely balance relationships among multiple powers to advance their own interests. The question is whether they have multiple partners available to balance in the first place. Fourth, burdens. We win if we prove that having multiple superpowers gives developing countries more than just bargaining power, investment options, and policy autonomy than a world dominated by one superpower. Side opposition must prove that unipolar stability outweighs the harms of dependence on a single dominant actor. My first substantive: multipolarity creates bargaining power. The first mechanism is that competition forces great markets to offer better deals. If multiple superpowers want access to ports, markets, minerals, military partnerships, or diplomatic support, they must offer something in return: infrastructure financing, trade access, technology, or security guarantees. That's why countries like Vietnam have benefited greatly from balancing relationships with the United States, China, Japan, India, South Korea, and the EU. Vietnam is not choosing only one patron, it's extracting investment and support from many. That's only possible when multiple powers compete for its partnership. In a unipolar world, this disappears. When there is only one dominant power, developing countries lose that outside option. If the sole superpower offers unfavorable loan terms, imposes political conditions, or ignores local priorities, weaker states have nowhere else to go. The second mechanism is that leverage protects domestic policy autonomy. Some countries need ports, others need energy grids, technology transfer, debt relief, food security, or defense partnerships. Yet in a unipolar system, the dominant power can condition aid and market access on its preferred model of politics and economics. Multipolarity weakens that coercive power. When one power demands too much, governments can seek investment elsewhere. When one market closes, another may remain open. When one patron becomes overbearing, alternatives exist. The third mechanism is that competition disciplines superpowers before negotiations even begin. Once powerful states know developing countries have alternatives, they moderate their demands because they fear being replaced. Power is most dangerous when it lacks constraints, and unipolarity removes the strongest constraint of all: competition. The terminal impact is agency. Development is not just money entering a country, it's the ability of that country to shape its future. Multipolarity gives developing countries the ability to say no, compare offers, diversify partners, and negotiate from strength rather than desperation. Side opposition's world asks developing countries to trust the mercy of a single dominant actor. Our world gives them alternatives. My second substantive is expanded development. The first mechanism is diversification. Developing countries face massive simultaneous needs: infrastructure, education, healthcare, industrialization, energy access, climate adaptation, and job creation. No single superpower can provide all of that well. Different powers offer different strengths. For example, China has financed large scale infrastructure through the Belt and Road Initiative. Western states and institutions most often provide technology, private capital, and governance support. India, Japan, Turkey, the Gulf states, and the EU all offer different development pathways. Multipolarity lets developing countries combine these strengths instead of being trapped against a single model. The OECD estimates that the annual financing gap for sustainable development in developing and emerging economies has grown to about $4 trillion. That means developing countries do not have the luxury of relying on just one source of capital. They need more doors open, not fewer. The second mechanism is innovation through competition. When powers compete for influence, they compete by delivering results. If one power funds railways, another funds ports. If one offers scholarships, another expands market access. If one creates a development bank, another improves its own lending terms. Developing countries benefit by receiving multiple offers. We see this in Africa and Southeast Asia. Chinese infrastructure financing pushed Western states to create alternatives like the G7's Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. Rivalry created pressure to pay attention to regions that had long been underfunded. In a unipolar world, ignored countries stay ignored because no rival exists to make neglect costly. The third mechanism is long-term protection from abandonment. Side opposition will say that a single superpower creates stability. In a unipolar system, the dominant power decides which regions matter. Countries outside its strategic priorities can be neglected entirely. Multipolarity changes that. Even countries once considered peripheral become valuable because influence itself is contested. Their votes in international organizations, access to resources, trade routes, and partnerships all become worth courting. Side opposition might even argue that rivalry creates risk. We agree that competition can be dangerous, but the comparative question is whether developing countries are safer with options or with dependence. Dependence is an even bigger risk. It means one power can punish, ignore, or exploit a developing country with little to no consequence. It gives them the tools to survive and bargain within an unequal world. Ultimately, this debate is not about whether great powers are good. It's about whether concentrated power is good. Side opposition asks developing countries to trust one dominant actor with their future. We believe the countries most vulnerable to global exploitation should never be forced to rely on only one source of support. Competition creates leverage. Leverage creates agency. Agency creates development. For all these reasons, we are so proud to propose.